In the rich and prosperous village of Zangora, there lived a young woman named Atieno, the daughter of the powerful Chief Malu. Atieno was admired by everyone for her stunning beauty, but it was her pride that caught the most attention. She was well aware of her allure and the many men who sought her hand in marriage. Yet, Atieno refused them all. Her heart was set on marrying a prince, a man with wealth, titles, and power, someone who could match her status. To her, love wasn't enough. Only a union with someone of great social standing would do. She believed that nothing less was worthy of her. Atieno's refusal to entertain the idea of marrying anyone less than royalty made her known throughout the village. People spoke of her as if she were already a queen, with high expectations of what her future should look like. Her father, Chief Malu, was patient at first, but the pressure from the village and his own growing concerns about Atieno's attitude began to weigh heavily on him. Chief Malu saw that his daughter's beauty and pride were blinding her to the true values of life. She was growing more arrogant with each passing day, dismissing the love and loyalty of those around her. Despite the many suitors who came with humble hearts and good intentions, Atieno turned them all away with cruel words and cold indifference. The villagers watched as she distanced herself further from the humble men of the village, her sights set only on an unattainable ideal. Chief Malu, however, was determined to teach his daughter a valuable lesson, one that would shape her future in a way she never expected. In a moment of frustration and resolve, Chief Malu made a decision that would change everything. He arranged for Atieno to marry a man named Kwami, a poor farmer who lived on the outskirts of the village. Kwame was quiet and humble, a hard-working man who had no wealth to offer. However, Chief Malu saw in him a man of great character, a man who would show Atieno the true meaning of worth, something far more valuable than money or status. When Atieno was told of the arrangement, she was furious. She could not believe that her father, the great chief, would demand such a marriage. A farmer. Father, I am meant to marry a prince, not some lowly commoner, she protested, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. The very idea of marrying someone so beneath her was beyond humiliating. Despite her protests, Chief Malu remained firm. You will marry him, and you will learn that true worth is not in gold, but in character, he declared. His words left Atieno no room for negotiation. Her heart sank as she realized she had no choice in the matter. The villagers were shocked by the news. Whispers filled the air, as they wondered how a woman of Atieno's stature could be forced into such a humble marriage. They had never seen a chief's daughter so disgraced. Yet Atieno's anger only grew stronger as the wedding day approached. She could not fathom how her father, whom she had always respected, could do this to her. Chief Malu, though wise and respected, had grown increasingly concerned about his daughter, Atieno. As the chief of Zangora, he had spent his life building his wealth and status, but he could see that his daughter's beauty and pride had led her down a dangerous path. Atieno's arrogance was pushing away anyone who truly cared for her, and Chief Malu knew that something had to change. He feared that if she continued on this path, she would never understand the true meaning of love, loyalty, or respect. Chief Malu spent many sleepless nights thinking about how he could teach his daughter the lesson she so desperately needed. He had tried gentle words and advice, but they had fallen on deaf ears. Atieno was too blinded by her own self-importance to listen to anyone. The village buzzed with talk of her rejection of suitor after suitor, and her belief that only a prince could ever be worthy of her. It became clear to Chief Malu that the time for soft words had passed. Atieno needed something more to shake her from her prideful ways. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Chief Malu made a decision. He would arrange for Atieno to marry Kwame, a poor farmer who lived on the outskirts of Zangora. Kwame was not wealthy, nor was he of high status. In fact, he was a quiet, humble man who worked tirelessly to tend to his small farm. His life was one of hard work and modest means, but he had something that Atieno lacked: character, honor, and humility. Chief Malu believed that by marrying someone like Kwame, Atieno would learn that true worth didn't lie in wealth or power, but in a person's heart and actions. The decision was a tough one for Chief Malu. He knew it would be met with resistance from his daughter, but he also knew it was the only way to humble her and help her see beyond her narrow view of the world. He sat Atieno down one evening, his face serious, and explained his decision. "You will marry Kwame," Chief Malu said, his voice firm. and you will learn that true worth is not in gold, but in character." His words were simple, but powerful, carrying the weight of a father who had spent a lifetime building a village and a legacy. Atieno stared at him in disbelief. She couldn't understand how her father, the chief, could make such a decision. She had always believed she was destined for something greater, for a life filled with luxury and grandeur. The idea of marrying a poor farmer was beyond comprehension. But Chief Malu's mind was made up. Atieno would have to face the consequences of her pride and learn the value of humility. He knew that this marriage, though difficult, would ultimately shape her into the woman she was meant to become. And as much as it pained him to see her so upset, he believed it was the right thing to do. When Atieno heard her father's decision, she was completely outraged. Her heart raced with anger as she struggled to believe what she was hearing. "A farmer! Father, I am meant to marry a prince, not a commoner," she shouted, her voice trembling with disbelief. She could hardly fathom the idea of marrying someone so far beneath her. Someone who had no wealth, no title, and no status. Atieno's world had always been about luxury, fine clothes, and suitors who were rich enough to provide her with everything she desired. The thought of being tied to a poor farmer was an insult she couldn't accept. Her father's words echoed in her mind, but she refused to believe that marrying someone like Kwame could possibly be the right choice. "I will not marry him," she cried out, pacing the room in frustration. "I am the daughter of the great Chief Malu. I deserve more than this." Her words were sharp, full of defiance, but Chief Malu remained calm and firm in his decision. He had made up his mind, and nothing Atieno said could change that. Despite her protests, the wedding preparations went ahead. Atieno's anger grew as each day passed. She spent hours in her room, refusing to speak to anyone, as the villagers began to whisper among themselves. The news of the chief's decision spread quickly throughout Zangora, and the village was buzzing with shock and surprise. How could the great Chief Malu, the man who had built an empire, force his beautiful and proud daughter to marry a poor farmer? People couldn't believe it. They had always admired Atieno for her beauty and her high standards, but now they saw her as a girl who had been brought low, forced to marry someone who was not worthy of her. The whispers grew louder as the wedding day approached. Some villagers felt pity for Atieno, while others thought she deserved to be humbled. A few even secretly wondered what Chief Malu's decision meant for the future of the village. Would this marriage bring a change in the chief's family? Could it be that Atieno, the proud daughter, would be taught a lesson about the importance of character over wealth? Atieno, however, refused to let anyone see how deeply the situation was affecting her. She put on a brave face and pretended to accept her fate. But inside, her heart was filled with resentment. She could not shake the image of herself marrying a poor man, a farmer who could never give her the life she had always imagined. She was the daughter of a chief, destined for a life of grandeur, not one of hardship and struggle. As the days passed, Atieno grew more bitter. She spent long hours in her room, preparing herself for the wedding she could not escape. The thought of it made her sick to her stomach. But despite her fury, there was nothing she could do to change her father's mind. The wedding was arranged, and no amount of protest could stop it. The villagers watched with a mix of curiosity and judgment as the once proud chief's daughter was forced into a union she never wanted. Atieno's life changed completely the moment she stepped into Kwame's small, modest hut. Gone were the luxurious silks and fine fabrics she had always worn, replaced by simple clothes that were too plain for her liking. The bustling palace with its grand hallways, servants, and everything she was accustomed to now seemed like a distant memory. Her new home was small, cramped, and far from the comfort she had been raised to expect. The walls of the hut were made of rough wood, and the roof barely kept the rain out. There were no beautiful carpets or expensive furniture, just basic necessities, and everything was foreign to her. For the first time, Atieno felt truly helpless. In her father's palace, she had never lifted a finger to do any work. She had servants for everything, someone to comb her hair, someone to bring her food, and someone to clean the floors. But here, in Kwame's hut, there was no one to wait on her. Atieno was expected to do everything herself, cooking, cleaning, and even washing the clothes. The simple tasks felt beneath her, and she struggled with every chore. She would look at the small pot over the fire and wonder how she could possibly cook a meal. It felt like an impossible task, And with each failed attempt, she grew more frustrated. "I hate this life," she cried one evening, as she burned the meal she had been trying to prepare, her face flushed with anger as she threw the spoon down on the ground. The thought of spending the rest of her life in this miserable hut with a poor farmer was unbearable. She had always imagined a life of luxury, and now here she was, stuck in a place she never wanted to be. She had hoped that somehow her father would change his mind, but there was no escape. The more she tried to resist, the more she realized that this was her new reality. Kwame, on the other hand, remained calm and patient. He had spent his entire life in the village, and the simple life he led was one he had grown accustomed to. He never complained about the hard work that came with being a farmer. He had grown used to working the land, fixing what was broken, and making do with what little he had. But he understood that Atieno's life had been very different. He didn't expect her to be able to handle the tasks right away, but he was patient with her, offering help when needed, even though she refused it. Every day, Atieno found new reasons to be angry. She resented the hours spent chopping wood, fetching water from the well, and trying to clean the hut. These were things she had never imagined doing in her life. She would sometimes glance out of the small window and see the other women of the village walking by, dressed in their colorful clothes, laughing and chatting with one another. She longed to be part of that world again, to return to her life of privilege. But no one cared for her pride anymore. She had no one to turn to. And every day she was reminded of how far she had fallen from the life she once knew. Kwame watched quietly as Atieno struggled. He knew that she was unhappy, and part of him felt sorry for her. But he also believed that this was the only way she would learn. He had seen people like her before. People who had everything but were never truly content. He believed that only through hardship would she learn to appreciate the simple things in life, to understand the value of hard work and humility. He didn't force her to change, but he hoped that over time, she would come to see the world through different eyes. Despite his patience, Atieno's anger only grew. She could not accept this life, and every day felt like a punishment. The fire in her heart burned brighter, and she clung to the hope that someday, somehow, she would escape. But with each passing day, the reality of her situation became clearer. This was her life now, and she would have to find a way to survive it. Kwame's patience and kindness were qualities Atieno had never known to exist in someone like him. Despite her harsh words and refusal to accept her new life, he never once raised his voice or showed any signs of anger. Every time she snapped at him or complained, he simply nodded and went about his work. He understood that Atieno had been raised in a world of luxury, where she had never been forced to do a single thing for herself. He knew that this transition would be difficult for her, but instead of becoming frustrated with her, he remained calm, always offering a helping hand when needed, even though she rarely accepted it. Kwame's quiet nature and unwavering kindness baffled Atieno. She had expected him to lash out or become angry with her, to at least show some sign of resistance. But instead, he was gentle, even when she refused to speak to him or ignored his attempts to help. It was as if he understood her frustration, as if he knew that deep down she didn't want to be there, that she was fighting a battle within herself. Yet, he did not hold her anger against her. Every day, he would do his chores, tend to the animals, and work on the farm without a single complaint. And every night, he would sit with her at the small table, offering a warm meal, trying to make their life together as comfortable as possible, even though he knew she resented him. Atieno, however, remained distant and cold. She couldn't bring herself to see Kwame the way he saw her. His kindness, no matter how genuine, only made her feel more guilty for her own behavior. She still couldn't accept the fact that she had been forced into this marriage. The more she saw Kwame's humility and how he never seemed to expect anything in return, the more she felt conflicted. She was torn between the way she had been raised to view people like Kwame, people she had once considered beneath her, and the reality of the situation she found herself in. But Atieno's heart was hard, and she refused to let go of her pride. She still believed that she deserved better, that she was meant for a life of grandeur, surrounded by riches and respect, not stuck in a small hut with a poor man. Every night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, planning her escape. She thought about running away, returning to her father's palace, and leaving this life behind. She felt trapped, but at the same time, her pride refused to allow her to admit that she might be wrong. She couldn't imagine ever truly accepting Kwame, or the life he had built for himself. Kwame, in contrast, remained a quiet presence in her life. He never pushed her to change, never forced her to see things his way. Instead, he simply showed her through his actions what it meant to live with integrity and kindness. He worked hard, treated everyone with respect, and carried himself with a quiet strength that Atieno couldn't help but notice, even if she didn't want to acknowledge it. But no matter how kind he was, Atieno's heart remained closed off, still stubbornly determined to escape the life she had been given. One quiet night, as the moonlight softly lit the small hut, Atieno noticed something unusual. She had been sitting by the fire, trying to calm her restless thoughts, when she saw Kwame slipping out of the door without a word. He moved quickly and quietly, as if trying to avoid being noticed. This caught Atieno's attention. She had grown used to Kwame's calm and predictable nature, and seeing him act so secretively was strange. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she quietly followed him from a distance, trying to stay hidden in the shadows. She crept through the trees, careful not to make any noise, her heart racing as she wondered where he was going. The night was still, with only the sound of the wind and distant animals breaking the silence. Kwame led her away from the hut, deeper into the forest, until she finally saw him stop near a clearing where several men were gathered. Atieno hid behind a large tree, her breath shallow as she watched them. She could hardly believe her eyes. Kwame, the quiet farmer who had been so kind to her, was meeting with a group of men she had never seen before. They stood around a small campfire, their faces serious and tense. As she peered closer, Atieno could hear their conversation, though their voices were low and hushed. The men spoke in urgent tones, discussing matters that seemed far beyond anything she had ever heard before. They mentioned plans, strategies, and something about protecting the kingdom. Atieno felt a chill run down her spine. What was going on? These weren't the kinds of topics she ever expected to hear from Kwame. She had always seen him as nothing more than a simple farmer. But now she was starting to question everything she thought she knew about him. As the men continued to talk, Atieno's mind raced. She could see the serious looks on their faces, their words making it clear that they were involved in something important, something dangerous. Kwame's calm demeanor had made her believe he was just an ordinary man, but now she realized there was more to him than she could ever have imagined. She felt a mix of confusion and fear. What was Kwame's true role in all of this? Why had he kept it a secret from her? She stayed hidden in the shadows for a while longer, her heart pounding as she tried to piece together what she had just witnessed. The more she listened, the more questions she had. Who were these men, and why was Kwame involved with them? Her mind buzzed with thoughts and theories. But one thing was certain. There was much more to her husband than met the eye, and she had no idea what she had gotten herself into. The next morning, Atieno could hardly contain herself. The discovery she had made in the forest the night before weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the men she had seen Kwame with, and the serious conversation they had shared. Every moment, every detail of that night seemed to shift the way she saw him. He wasn't the quiet, simple farmer she had thought he was. Something about him felt different now, like there was a side to him she had never seen before. Determined to get answers, Atieno could no longer hold back her growing suspicions. As soon as Kwame returned from his morning work, she confronted him. She didn't care about her pride anymore. She needed the truth. Standing in front of him, she spoke in a firm tone, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and anger. "Who are you, Kwame? You are not just a poor farmer," she demanded, her eyes narrowing as she tried to read his expression. "I saw you with those men last night, speaking of things far beyond anything a farmer would know. What is going on?" Kwame looked at her, his eyes soft but filled with a kind of resignation. He had known that one day she would ask, but he had never expected it to come like this. He had kept his secret hidden for so long, not wanting to bring the weight of his work into their marriage. But now, with Atieno standing before him, looking at him with a mixture of disbelief and fear, he knew the time had come to tell her the truth. Taking a deep breath, he finally spoke, his voice calm, but filled with a quiet strength. "Atieno, I am not just a farmer," he said. "I am Agent Kwame, a secret protector of this kingdom." Atieno stared at him, her mind racing to process what he had just revealed. A secret protector. What did that even mean? Kwame wasn't just the man she had been forced to marry. He was part of something much bigger. She felt a surge of emotions, surprise, confusion, and even a touch of betrayal. He had kept this from her, kept this secret hidden while she had believed him to be just a simple farmer. All the while, he had been living a life she could never have imagined. Kwame continued, sensing her shock. "I was sent here to protect the kingdom, Atieno. I've been working undercover to expose a plot against your father, Chief Malu, and the royal family." Atieno felt her breath catch in her throat. Her father? A plot against the kingdom. The words felt surreal, like a story from a distant land. Kwame wasn't just a humble man who had been forced into marriage with her. He was a protector, working behind the scenes to uncover something dangerous, something that threatened everything she knew. "I never wanted you to find out like this," Kwame said, his voice gentle but filled with regret. "But the truth is, I couldn't tell you. I had to keep my identity a secret to protect you and everyone else. The people behind the plot are dangerous, and if they knew who I really was, they would stop at nothing to silence me." Atieno's heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to come together. All the strange behavior, the late-night meetings, the secrecy. It all made sense now. Kwame hadn't been avoiding her or hiding from her. He had been protecting her, the entire kingdom, and everyone she loved. The realization hit her hard. She had judged him, misunderstood him, and treated him as though he was beneath her, when in fact, he was more important and brave than anyone she had ever known. "I had no idea," Atieno whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, Kwame. I didn't understand. I thought you were just a farmer. Nothing more." Kwame smiled softly, but there was no bitterness in his expression. "It's all right, Atieno. I never wanted you to know this side of me, but now you understand why I had to be secretive. The work I do, it's dangerous, and I wanted to keep you safe." Atieno stood there, overwhelmed by the revelation. Everything she had believed about Kwame had been turned upside down. The man she had married, the man she had resented and misunderstood, was a hero in his own right. She realized how wrong she had been in judging him based on his status and wealth. The things that mattered to her, money, status, and outward appearances, were meaningless compared to the courage, honor, and selflessness that Kwame had shown. I never imagined you were so brave," she said, her voice filled with emotion. She felt a deep sense of admiration for him, a respect she hadn't known before. It was as if the veil had been lifted, and she was finally seeing him for who he truly was, someone worthy of her respect. Not because of his wealth, but because of the person he was inside. Kwame looked at her, his eyes soft but filled with understanding. "It's not about being brave, Atieno. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." Atieno nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had misjudged him, but now she saw him clearly. The man she had thought was beneath her was, in fact, a hero, and she felt a deep sense of regret for the way she had treated him. She had married him out of duty, but now, for the first time, she realized that her feelings for him were changing. She respected him, she admired him, and maybe, just maybe, she could learn to love him, not for his status or wealth, but for the man he truly was. Atieno stood there in stunned silence, her mind struggling to catch up with the truth that Kwame had just shared. Everything she had believed about him had been shattered. She had spent so many weeks looking down on him, resenting him for the life she thought she had been forced into. In her eyes, he had been nothing more than a poor farmer, a man beneath her, who was unworthy of her time or affection. But now, all of that seemed so far away. The man standing before her wasn't just a farmer. He was a secret protector of the kingdom, a man of courage, strength, and honor. She couldn't believe how wrong she had been. All the anger, the complaints, the coldness she had shown him seemed so foolish now. How could she have been so blind? She had judged him based on his appearance, his simple life, without knowing who he truly was. And now, she felt a deep sense of regret in her chest. She had underestimated him in every way, and now the weight of her mistake pressed heavily on her heart. "I misjudged you," Atieno said, her voice filled with remorse. The words felt like they didn't even begin to cover the depth of what she was feeling, but they were all she could offer in that moment. She couldn't take back the way she had treated him, but she knew she had to acknowledge her mistake. Kwame had been nothing but patient and kind with her, even when she had been rude and dismissive. He had never once lost his temper, never once treated her the way she had treated him. He had only shown her respect, even when she didn't deserve it. For the first time, Atieno truly saw Kwame for who he was, a man of unwavering character, a man who put the kingdom before himself, a man who sacrificed his own happiness to protect others. He wasn't the simple farmer she had assumed him to be. He was a hero, one who had worked tirelessly in the shadows to safeguard everything she held dear. The realization hit her hard, and she felt a deep sense of shame. She had thought so little of him, and now she could see him for the incredible person he truly was. Her regret was overwhelming. She had let her pride and arrogance blind her to the truth, and now she had lost so much time, so much potential to understand him. But as she looked at him, standing there, with no anger or bitterness, she realized that perhaps there was still time to make things right. She had wronged him, but she wanted to change. She wanted to be the woman he deserved, the woman who could see past appearances and appreciate the true worth of a person. "I am sorry, Kwame," Atieno continued, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "I didn't know. I didn't understand who you really are, but now I see you for the incredible man you truly are." Kwame looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, as if he was processing her words. Atieno held her breath, waiting for his reaction. To her surprise, he simply nodded, a small but understanding smile appearing on his face. "It's all right, Atieno," he said quietly. "I never expected you to understand right away, but now that you do, that's all that matters." Atieno felt a wave of relief wash over her, though her regret was far from gone. She had hurt him, but he had forgiven her. In that moment, she realized how much she had grown. The pride that had once consumed her was slowly being replaced with humility. The woman who had been so focused on wealth and status was starting to understand what truly mattered: honor, kindness, and love. As she looked at Kwame, she felt a new sense of admiration for him, a deeper respect than she had ever known. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. She wasn't just beginning to see him as a man of honor, she was beginning to see him as someone she could truly care for. Kwame's words hit Atieno like a bolt of lightning, leaving her stunned and unable to process what she had just heard. She stood there, trying to understand what he was saying, but the pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together. Okoro, the man who had been at her father's side for as long as she could remember, was planning to betray them. Okoro had always been a loyal advisor, someone Atieno had trusted and looked up to. The idea that he could be involved in such a plot seemed impossible, yet Kwame's serious expression and the urgency in his voice made her realize that this was no time for disbelief. Kwame's face was grave, his eyes dark with the weight of the secret he had been carrying for so long. He had always known that the truth would eventually come to light, but he had hoped it wouldn't be this way. He looked at Atieno, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "Atieno, your father is in grave danger. Someone close to him is planning a coup. It's Okoro. He's the one leading the plot." Atieno's heart sank. Okoro. How could he betray her father, the man who had trusted him like a brother? Okoro had been the advisor who helped shape her father's rule, the one who had always been by his side, advising him on matters of great importance. The thought that he would turn against Chief Malu after everything they had been through was incomprehensible. Kwame continued, "Okoro has been secretly working with others who want to overthrow your father. They plan to strike tomorrow, under the cover of darkness. Your father's life is in danger, and it's only a matter of time before they make their move." The words felt like a heavy weight in Atieno's chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. The betrayal was too much to take in all at once. How could Okoro, someone so close to her father, betray him in such a terrible way? Atieno had never suspected that anyone in her father's circle could be capable of such treachery. She had always believed that her father's kingdom was safe, that he was surrounded by loyal people who would never harm him. But now, everything she had believed in felt shattered. Kwame could see the shock in her eyes, and he gently placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to offer some comfort in the face of such a cruel truth. "I know this is hard to understand, Atieno, but your father is not safe. If we don't act quickly, Okoro and his men will succeed, and it will be too late." Atieno's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to warn her father. She had to stop Okoro before it was too late, but how could she do that? She had no power, no influence. Her father was the one who held the kingdom together, and without him, everything would fall apart. If Okoro succeeded, the kingdom would be lost, and she would never be able to forgive herself for not acting sooner. Without wasting another moment, Atieno turned to Kwame, her face set with determination. "We have to stop this," she said firmly. "We can't let Okoro do this to my father. We have to warn him, And we have to make sure Okoro is stopped before he can carry out his plan. Kwame nodded, his expression serious. We'll need to act fast, Atieno. There's no time to waste. I've already sent word to the guards, but we need to get to your father before Okoro and his men make their move. Atieno felt a surge of urgency. She had spent so much time looking down on Kwame, resenting him for his position in her life, and now he was the one who was protecting her and her family. She had underestimated him in every way, but now she saw him for what he truly was, a hero. The weight of the situation was overwhelming, but she knew she had to act. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. With a final, determined glance at Kwame, Atieno set off toward the palace, her heart racing as she prepared to face the man she had once trusted, the man who had betrayed them all. The fate of her father, her family, and the entire kingdom now rested on their ability to stop Okoro before it was too late. Atieno and Kwame moved quickly through the village, their hearts pounding with urgency. They had no time to lose. Every second that passed brought them closer to disaster. Atieno's mind raced with worry about her father, about the kingdom that could be torn apart by Okoro's betrayal. She had never felt such fear before, but she had no choice but to keep going, to trust that Kwame knew what to do. Together, they had to stop Okoro before it was too late. As they approached the palace gates, Atieno's thoughts were all over the place. What if it was already too late? What if Okoro had already made his move? But Kwame was calm, focused. He had been through dangerous situations before, and he was determined not to let this one slip by. He turned to Atieno. Stay close, and don't say anything unless I tell you to. We need to warn your father and move quickly. Atieno nodded, her chest tightening. She had to stay strong for her father. As they reached the palace, they were stopped by the guards. Atieno tried to push past them, but the guards, unfamiliar with Kwame, were suspicious. Who are you? One of them asked. Why are you here at this hour? Kwame stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding. We need to see Chief Malu immediately. There's a threat to his life. The guards hesitated, not sure if they should take Kwame's words seriously. Atieno could see the doubt in their eyes, but Kwame didn't back down. He was used to being in tense situations, and his calm demeanor was enough to convince the guards to let them through. The tension in the air was thick, but Atieno followed him inside, praying that they weren't too late. When they finally entered the chief's chambers, Atieno rushed to her father's side. Chief Malu looked up from his desk, his brow furrowed in confusion. Atieno! Kwame, what is this about? Atieno spoke quickly, her voice trembling. Father, we need to talk. It's about Okoro. He's planning to betray you. He's planning to attack the kingdom tomorrow. Chief Malu's face remained unreadable. He had always trusted Okoro, and the thought of him being a traitor seemed impossible. He shook his head, disbelief written all over his face. Okoro, my most trusted advisor. This makes no sense. Kwame stepped forward, his voice firm and serious. I wish it weren't true, Chief Malu, but I've seen the evidence myself. He's been working with others to overthrow your rule. I know this because I've been investigating him for weeks. Atieno watched her father closely, hoping he would believe them. But Chief Malu's expression was still doubtful. I've known Okoro for years. He's never given me any reason to doubt him. Atieno's heart sank. She knew how much her father relied on Okoro. He had always been there for him, advising him in times of trouble, but Atieno knew the truth now. Okoro had been hiding his true intentions all along, and they had to act before it was too late. Kwame didn't give up. I understand that this is difficult to believe, but we can prove it. There are weapons hidden in Okoro's quarters, and we need to search them before he makes his move. Atieno held her breath as Chief Malu considered the words. After a tense moment, he finally nodded. Very well, we'll search his quarters. But if this is a mistake, you'll have to answer for it. As the guards moved to search Okoro's quarters, Atieno and Kwame waited anxiously. They couldn't afford any more delays. The minutes felt like hours, and the silence in the palace was unbearable. Finally, one of the guards returned with the news they had been hoping for. We found hidden weapons, Chief Malu. It's true. Okoro is planning to betray you. Atieno's heart raced as her father's face turned pale. The truth was out, and there was no denying it now. Chief Malu's expression shifted from disbelief to fury. So it's true. Okoro, my closest friend, he was planning to destroy everything I've worked for. Kwame nodded, his voice resolute. Yes, Chief, and if we don't act quickly, he will succeed. Chief Malu stood up, his eyes burning with anger. "We cannot let this happen. Okoro will pay for his treachery." He turned to the guards. "Prepare for battle. We'll defend the kingdom no matter what it takes." Atieno felt a surge of relief knowing that her father had finally seen the truth. But the battle was far from over. They had to prepare for the worst. Atieno and Kwame moved quickly, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The kingdom was in danger, but they weren't going to let it fall without a fight.